Coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles, after the Carolina Panthers traded for Baker Mayfield, I want to get into how that compares to the Eagles' current state of the quarterback position. Plus, how does Jalen Hurts keep the QB1 position beyond the 2022 season? What does he have to do in 2022 to make sure the Eagles don't look for other options the following year? That's coming up on today's edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm Louie DiBiase. Welcome into a Wednesday edition of your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, going strong now. For the last 4 years, you can find us on all podcast platforms, on YouTube as well, and on Twitter at Locked On Birds, at DiBiase, LOE. It's a Wednesday edition of the show, guys. Episode 2 this week of 4. Download it into your phone. We get back to daily next week, as then we're officially next week, Tuesday, 2 weeks away from the start of Philadelphia Eagles training camp at NovaCare Complex. 2 weeks away. Football gets going. We get training camp notes from all the beat reporters. We get open training camp as well, August 7th at Lincoln Financial. I'll be down there in the city of brotherly love. And then, of course, the preseason. And before you know it, the regular season is going to be upon us, and the Eagles will take on the Detroit Lions. I can't wait for the season to get going. So many expectations for the Birds because of how good this roster looks right now on paper. And really, we talked about it a few weeks ago, and the Eagles signed Jaquiski Tartt, the former safety of the San Francisco 49ers. We pretty much said, on paper, short term. Of course, long term, there's still a lot of holes on this roster, cornerback and safety, especially in the secondary with the age of Darius Slay, the unknown of James Bradberry long term with this football team, his age as well, and he's only on a 1-year deal. There are some long-term holes, running back maybe even. You can talk about the offensive line, right guard, right tackle. But for 2022, after they signed Jaquiski Tartt, because safety was really the last shoe to drop, what did we say? It was really, okay, this team on paper looks as complete as they have in a long time. What's going to hold this football team back? What's the biggest question mark right now? Now I think it's just, is Jalen Hurts going to take a bigger step and not hold this team back in the 2022 season? And I started thinking about the quarterback position again today because I saw in the NFC, the Carolina Panthers made a trade today for former first overall pick, Cleveland Browns quarterback Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was sent to Carolina for Cleveland got a 5th-round pick conditionally, as of course we know the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson, selling their soul to the devil to, try to have a franchise quarterback, literally trying to sell their soul. So Baker now is in Carolina, and it got me thinking again about the Eagles quarterback position compared to Carolina's, compared to the rest of the NFL. Really, that trade brought me back to, honestly, and it doesn't even have to do with the Eagles much, but and it kind of does. It ties in with it. Everything I hate about some approaches at quarterback, like what the Panthers did with Baker Mayfield and what the Browns did, honestly, in 2018 with Baker Mayfield with that first overall draft pick, was settle. I think they went safe. I think the Cleveland Browns settled for Baker Mayfield in the 2018 draft over some more unknowns, but they had much higher ceilings. You guys know that is my motto. I would much rather go for the Lamar Jackson or the Josh Allen, who, yes, maybe they aren't as safe of a pick as Baker Mayfield, although their rushing, their mobility makes them pretty safe, especially Lamar coming out of Louisville. And we've seen how those two have blown up, and they're both, to me, top 5, top 7 quarterbacks in the NFL. That one has won an MVP award in Lamar. Josh Allen should have, and I think he will at some point in the next 2 years. The Cleveland Browns passed on those two kind of potential generational prospects when it comes to their physical abilities for Baker Mayfield, who was very accurate at Oklahoma, really good passing mechanics. I think they just settled for accuracy and good pocket presence, and I think they went with a guy that they knew what he was going to be for the most part. And you'd never, to me, do that to me at all at the quarterback position, because there's no point. If you're going to get a Kirk Cousins type of quarterback long-term, or a Jared Goff or a Baker Mayfield, I always think you're going to be looking for an upgrade. So I don't see the point of drafting a quarterback that has a low ceiling, like the Patriots taking Mac Jones or the Cardinals taking Josh Rosen. I mean, you saw what they had to do the year later. They're going to take Kyler Murray. The 49ers with Jimmy Garoppolo, they're going to take Trey Lance. The Cincinnati Bengals eventually are going to move off Andy Dalton and go after Joe Burrow. The Chargers, too, going after Justin Herbert. The Dolphins, I think they're going to realize eventually that they're going to have to follow this path. It just never makes any sense to me why teams take this route at quarterback. And it really, truly bothers me. I hate complacency at this spot because it's the one position, maybe in all of sports, that you cannot afford to be complacent. Yeah, you can win to a certain degree with a good, not great quarterback, but we all know it's not sustainable in the modern day NFL. And it's also just not as fun to not have a star at this spot with the way these contracts are going now for signal callers, even for good, not great ones. I mean, look at the deals that, Kirk Cousins got, and heck, even Derek Carr. Even those guys get paid. So that's just not my approach. And seeing the Panthers, it really bothers me. And why did teams do this? Well, another part of it is because you see desperate coaches and general managers get even more desperate to save their jobs. They try to take shortcuts at the quarterback position to save their job, to get a certain floor of winning done. And so this kind of triggered me seeing Baker go to Carolina because it reminded me so much of what Chip Kelly did in 2015 when he traded not only Nick Foles, but also a second-round draft pick for Sam Bradford. He was trying to take a shortcut to finding a quarterback that could save his job, really, that could speed up the process, right? Chip Kelly wasn't patient. He never tried to develop a quarterback, right? They're settling for mediocrity. Matt Rule's in the same position. He has to win this year, just like Chip Kelly in 2015 had to prove Jeffrey Lurie right in giving him full control of the roster. So he tries to say, I don't want to take multiple years to reset and find the guy. The roster's already kind of good. And that's the thing, too. That's always a trap, is when your roster's already pretty strong, like Philly's was then and is now, and Carolina's is right now. Is you also don't want to waste that roster, so you feel the need to just get any, semi-good quarterback in there. And it's just such a trap for mediocrity. Those two quarterbacks, or I should say, those two head coaches, Chip Kelly, now Matt Rule, they didn't really have the patience to develop a quarterback. And then they didn't have the time to develop one. So they have to take shortcuts. So Sam Darnold, he was a former third overall pick. Sam Bradford, he was a former first overall pick. Same with Baker Mayfield. To me, it's a waste of time. It's a waste of time at that point, because in the NFL now, if a quarterback doesn't hit their stride after year 2 or 3, I got news for you. They are who they are. Sam Darnold is who he is. Baker Mayfield is who he is. Sam Bradford in 2015, we all knew who Sam Bradford was at that time. So don't fool yourself about thinking there's some sort of ceiling there still because of their draft status. This trade is everything I hate about certain approaches to quarterback. If I was Carolina, to be honest with you, I'd start Matt Corral. What do you have to lose? He either hits the upside that I think he has far more of talent-wise than Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. And if he bottoms out, guess what? The Panthers, you have a top pick in the 2023 draft, which is super strong right now at quarterback. I don't know. I just think it's crazy, this approach. Carolina passed on a quarterback 3 drafts in a row now for this. The Eagles, it makes you think about the Eagles, because Philadelphia now has passed in both the 2021 draft and the 2022 draft at quarterback. And of course, the situations are definitely different. I'm not saying the Eagles are doing exactly what the Panthers are doing. Like Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman, they are not desperate. I think the 2021 class, although I would not have passed on Malik Willis, and I did like Matt Corral and Desmond Ridder to a certain degree, I don't think they're settling. Like, I think, number one, Jalen Hurts is worth waiting on and giving more time compared to Darnold or Baker. And also, the Eagles did try to acquire certain quarterbacks the last 2 off seasons. Zach Wilson, Russell Wilson, unfortunately, Deshaun Watson. So it's not exactly the same. And I do believe the Eagles won't go 3 years into this process if Jalen Hurts kind of plateaus like the middling Carolina Panthers have. So if Hurts doesn't improve this year, I don't think they'll do that. But, you're getting close to that territory where it starts to get dangerous. The team is good and they have continuous success, and you get scared to move off your quarterback. Again, I don't think the Eagles will do that, but Chip Kelly did it before, and Matt Rule's doing it right now in Carolina. Maybe I shouldn't say not scared to move off your quarterback, but scared to take bigger swings because you know your job security could be on the line, and because your roster is good and you don't want to give up the consistent playoff success you might be having, or I should say playoff contention. You know what I mean? It's a bad recipe for complacency, and I don't think the Eagles will fall into this trap, because if Jalen Hurts does not take certain steps this year, there's a huge opportunity in the 2023 offseason. And that's the question I want to get into coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles is, if Jalen Hurts does improve in 2022, how much, I should say, does he have to improve to convince the Eagles that he is the guy in 2023 and beyond? Because I think most people do agree he's going to improve. How much does he have to improve to make not only the Eagles commit to him long term, but also to make you feel like the Eagles are not in a similar situation to a team like the Carolina Panthers, who are just dying in mediocrity right now with now Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, and Matt Corral? I want to get into it coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. And guys, today's show is sponsored by BetOnline, the number one source for all your betting needs and sports information. They're the official sports book of the Locked On Podcast Network. I had so much fun the last few weeks betting on golf and the NHL playoffs, the NBA finals. Of course, right now you have MLB baseball. The Philadelphia Phillies, they're 22-9 since the start of June 1st, even with all the injuries in the pitching and with Bryce Harper right now too. I mean, they won 11-0 yesterday against the Nationals. Bet the over right now on the Phillies when it comes to runs. Bet them to cover. Make sure you're riding with the Philadelphia Phillies. Bet on everything in the MLB. You've got NBA futures. Where's Kevin Durant going to go? Kyrie Irving. NFL futures as well. Could Jalen Hurts potentially be a dark horse to win MVP in 2022? All of those odds, bets, and more at betonline.net. Again, they're your best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all the odds for the MMA as well, boxing, and golf. Head over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back in to this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles. I'm Louie DiBiase, getting into the quarterback position. You know, my brain starts to turn when any team does something at quarterback. It gets me thinking about the position as a whole and gets me thinking about the state of the position for the Philadelphia Eagles. And with the Carolina Panthers today trading a conditional fifth round pick for Baker Mayfield, it started to get me thinking about the Eagles and comparing their situation to Carolina, because again, the Panthers right now are just, Matt Rule's trying to save his job, and they just keep trying to find the highest floor at this position and take shortcuts to find their franchise quarterback instead of taking a guy with one of the 3 top 10 picks they've had the last 3 seasons and taking a real swing at, maybe a riskier prospect. Although I would consider, even like back at 2021, I would say Justin Fields or Mac Jones is a safer, not Mac Jones, but Justin Fields or trading up for Trey Lance is a safer bet than Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield. And so that's the situation they're in, because they're trying to save their coach's job. They have a good roster and they feel pressure right now, and they're just doing it the wrong way. And I compared it to the Eagles. Like, are the Eagles in that situation too? I don't think so. They've looked for upgrades over Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has more upside than those players in Carolina. He's worth giving more time. And they have a big opportunity here coming up in year 3 of this experiment post Carson Wentz to find out their true answer. And so the book is not written with the Eagles in this position. Consider it, compared to Carolina, which I think it's very clear what they've been doing in the state of, their franchise at the most important spot. So with the Eagles, again, Jalen Hurts has to improve this year if the Eagles are going to pass on a quarterback in the 2023 offseason. And I think we all know he's going to improve. That is the clear consensus. And I agree. Jalen Hurts improves every single year. And the roster is way better now than it's been in a long time for a young quarterback to thrive. So I think Jalen Hurts is going to be a much better quarterback than he was in 2021. But just improving isn't going to be enough, I don't think. If he improves his completion percentage just a little bit, he's got, more passing yards, more passing touchdowns. If they make the playoffs, heck, even if they win a playoff game, all of that sounds great for a 24-year-old quarterback still on a rookie deal with that kind of roster. That quick of a turnaround, back-to-back playoff appearances, both years as a full-time starter. Again, maybe you get a win or two. A lot of people would say that's enough. I think there's more to it. I think you have to add context to why did he have more passing yards? The completion percentage, the playoff success. How did it come? The Eagles aren't going to just settle for any sort of improvement. He needs to show, and again, I don't care about a certain stat line. I'm not going to say he needs to hit 4,000 passing yards or he's not the guy. He needs to have at least a 66% completion percentage and 30 passing touchdowns, so only 10 interceptions, a 30 to 10, ratio. I don't think that there has to be any specific stats, because stats a lot of the time do lie. Go look at Kirk Cousins' numbers over the last 5 seasons. Kirk Cousins is not a franchise quarterback. Numbers certainly lie, and the opposite as well. There's times the quarterbacks have worse numbers than they actually are. A lot of the time they don't tell the true story. For me, Jalen Hurts has to take a really big leap. He doesn't just need to improve. They need to, if they win a playoff game, they make the playoffs, his numbers in the passing game look better. It needs to be done in a certain way. He needs to show me that he can do it consistently. For the majority of the season, if they're in a shootout, he can go up against the best of the best. Like when they play Green Bay, and I think it's November, December, and Green Bay's having success on that defense, Jalen Hurts has got to show me that he can keep up with Aaron Rodgers, right? He's got to show you that those passing numbers went up because they're throwing the football more and the efficiency is improving with the volume. He's got to show you that he's a quarterback you can win because of his passing abilities, throwing the football 30 plus times a game consistently. So how much does Jalen Hurts need to improve in 2022 to be the guy in 2023? It's a loaded question because I don't have a specific number for you. You're just going to know it when you see it. You're going to know if they're relying on his arm this year more, or if they have to rely yet again on his legs and the talent around him that's elevating him. You can tell when a quarterback is elevating an offense versus when an offense is elevating a quarterback. So I think he's got to take dramatic steps forward, right? Even if they make the playoffs and he improves a little bit as a passer and they win a postseason game in a Tennessee Titans type of fashion, or a San Francisco 49ers like run last year where they're carrying Jimmy Garoppolo to the NFC Championship game, the Eagles are not going to settle for that. And I think that's the right call, because look what is at stake next offseason. Look at the opportunity Philadelphia has. The Eagles, well, number one, they have a roster right now that they cannot waste in a conference that is absolutely wide open. So you are not going to want to get complacent at quarterback and waste this roster with just, an average quarterback who can't really get it to its top gear. I mean, Gino brings it up all the time. It's like just a normal guy with a license and you put him in a NASCAR. He's not going to know how to utilize that thing to the best of its abilities. Yeah, could he get it in standard and, get it up to a certain miles per hour? Sure, but he can't kick that thing into high gear. You don't want to waste this roster right now. The time is now. The window is honestly right now. Not to mention next offseason, they have 2 first-round draft picks. And next draft is loaded with quarterbacks. And not just, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud. I think there are at least 5 or 6 other intriguing prospects that you're going to talk about on day 1 and day 2. I think Cameron Ward from Washington State is a deep sleeper. I think, Jake Haener from Fresno State, Anthony Richardson from Florida. There's a ton of guys. I think there's some other players too, like, Will Levis from Kentucky, that you're going to consider outside of just Stroud and Young, that have a higher ceiling perhaps than Jalen Hurts if he doesn't, grow that ceiling in 2022. And not only do you have the opportunity next year with this roster, with the 2 first-round picks and a loaded quarterback class, but Jalen Hurts is entering a contract season. Are you going to dish out a big contract to Jalen this year if they make the playoffs, but it's in a similar way to last year, stylistically on the offensive side of the football? Because I got news for you. Unless he completely flops, that deal is going to be big next year. That contract extension is going to be pretty hefty, $30+ million a year, even if he doesn't take an MVP-like step. And I don't even have to say he doesn't have to be an MVP this year, but even if that dramatic step does not come this year in the passing game, his contract is still going to be up there. It's going to be pretty hefty. And this team is coming off an extension that they regretted with Carson Wentz. So you add the contract year coming up, you add the draft picks, the quarterback class, the roster. The Eagles I don't think they're going to settle. And you know what the other question you got to ask yourself is too, if Jalen is kind of like he was in 2021, maybe a little better, you got to ask yourself too, am I going to give Hurts a contract instead of having a rookie do this? I feel like a rookie could do especially most of these guys coming into the league now, pretty much all of them, 99% of quarterback prospects have a certain floor of mobility. Couldn't a quarterback on a rookie deal that's a lot cheaper do what Jalen Hurts did last year as a passer and as a runner? I don't know. Maybe I'm underselling what Jalen's value was last year. I know Jalen's very valuable as a leader, and he was last year the most efficient mobile quarterback in the NFL when Lamar Jackson went down. So I totally understand his impact. He definitely was one of the biggest reasons he made the playoffs last year. But I feel like his production, at least last year and maybe a little bit better this year, with the roster around a young rookie second-year quarterback the next couple of years, I think that young quarterback could replicate that production and eventually exceed it with a higher ceiling. So those are the questions you have to ask yourself with a massive opportunity coming up. And I cannot wait to see what Jalen Hurts does with this opportunity to show that the Eagles can push all of that to the side and say we can use all those assets in another way to continue to build around him. And we don't have to feel like we're in a Carolina Panthers-like situation. You couldn't ask. I mean, there's a ton of pressure on Jalen for sure with all of that I just laid out for you. But you couldn't ask for a better situation to prove you're the guy, right? I mean, imagine Jalen Hurts having to show he's a franchise quarterback in the environment Carson Wentz was in 2019 and 2020. So it's a lot of pressure, but it's an amazing opportunity for a second-round pick when most of the time nowadays, second-round quarterbacks, they don't really get an opportunity. Day two quarterbacks, I mean, look at Matt Corral. The Panthers traded all the way up to the third round. They traded a future third-round pick to go get him. And 2 months later, they trade for Baker Mayfield, who's going to start this year. So very fascinated to see what happens at quarterback with the Eagles this year. Really excited to see if Jalen Hurts can take advantage of this opportunity. Because if he doesn't, I don't think the Eagles are going to follow suit like the Carolina Panthers in the NFC. We're going to continue getting into the quarterback position. Coming up next, this is Locked On QB1 right here on your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, Locked On Eagles. All right, Eagles fans, we're wrapping up this Wednesday edition of Locked On Eagles. Thank you so much for making LOE your first listen each and every day. The Carolina Panthers today traded a fifth-round pick conditionally, of course, to the Cleveland Browns for Baker Mayfield. Kind of comparing that to the Eagles quarterback position right now. Are the Eagles and Panthers kind of on the same timeline? Do they have the same mindset? I don't think so. I think the Eagles have every opportunity next year to upgrade if Jalen Hurts isn't the guy. But I do think Jalen Hurts is worth being more patient for, compared to Baker and Sam Darnold and, depending on who you ask, Matt Corral as well. Now I want to kind of compare the Panthers to the Eagles when it comes to the playoff race next year, because that trade didn't just get me thinking about the Eagles and quarterback in general, but also, as I said, the NFC is wide open this year. Outside of Tampa Bay, compared to the AFC, wide open. Outside of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady, the Green Bay Packers with Aaron Rodgers, and the Los Angeles Rams, the defending Super Bowl champions, everything in the conference is very close. And so the question is now with Baker Mayfield in Carolina, as I said in segment one, I despise everything the Panthers are doing right now at quarterback. It's everything that I hate about certain approaches that franchises take. I think he definitely does make the Panthers better though, right? At least in 2022. Are they a big threat to the Eagles? Like, let's say, I think the Eagles are going to compete for the division. I think they could win the NFC East. But let's say, Dallas wins it or Washington hits that ceiling and the Eagles are fighting for a wild card spot. They were last year with Carolina and a bunch of other teams in this conference. Is Carolina a legitimate threat that you should be worried about, compared to some other teams? I don't think so. I think Baker definitely makes them better, but with other teams in a similar boat, Carolina has a strong roster for sure. DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson with Christian McCaffrey. Love Brian Burns on defense. And you have as well Jeremy Chin and JC Horn coming back. Like that's a good defense. Derek Brown, of course, at defensive tackle. It's a good offense as well. Baker Mayfield has shown with that kind of support system, like the Cleveland Browns in 2020, he can win you a playoff game and compete for the playoffs. And like I said, even win a game. I think they're going to be better, but other teams in that situation, similarly, right? Strong rosters and good, not great quarterbacks. Philadelphia, New Orleans, Arizona, San Francisco. I think Carolina's the last of those teams. So I still think Philadelphia is a better football team than Carolina with Baker. I think San Francisco is as well. Arizona, who else did I say? New Orleans. I would say Washington too. I would still think the Commanders are a bigger threat, not even just in the division, but, to grab one of those playoff spots in the NFC. Baker definitely makes them better in 2022, but I still think that all those other teams that are in that second tables could be the best of all. Washington's got a high ceiling, but a much lower floor than these other teams. Like Carolina's floor is probably 6-7 wins. I don't think they're going to bottom out and win 3 with Baker like they could have with Darnold or Corral, but they're still not better than Philadelphia. I don't think Baker has the ceiling that Jalen Hurts has, or Trey Lance or Carson Wentz or Kyler Murray or even Jameis Winston for that matter. I like the Panthers roster a lot, but I still think they're pretty average. Probably more with the Minnesota Vikings. I'd probably even take the Vikings over the Panthers right now. So, they're better and they're going to be in the race for sure. And a lot of those teams are very close, including Philadelphia. But I would still give the Eagles and a lot of those teams the edge over the Panthers. So it's fascinating. It's not like the AFC where it's just a bunch of juggernauts, King Kong, Godzilla, King Ghidorah, if you will, for Godzilla fans out there. It's not all these star elite quarterbacks fighting for 7 spots. Like the AFC, there's going to be 2 elite quarterbacks, maybe not even in the playoffs. With the NFC, it's you got the top 3 teams, and then let's just figure out what happens. It's going to be way harder to predict the NFC to me than the AFC. I think that's the case because there's some AFC teams that are locks. The NFC outside of 3 teams, there's such a high ceiling and low floor for a lot of these other teams, just like where they could go this year. I can't wait to watch it. 2 weeks away, Eagles training camp starts. So this coming Tuesday, we're 2 weeks away. So we're pretty much 3 weeks away still right now. I'm trying to fast forward because I'm so excited to get football season started. But we're getting there, guys. Preseason coming up too. Before you know it, we'll be in September, and we can see all of this come to fruition. We got you covered, though, up until that point, and then all throughout the year, Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms. Just type in Locked On Eagles and make sure you subscribe. Odyssey, Google, Apple, you name it, Spotify. We're available on all platforms, Megaphone as well, and on YouTube, video form. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you follow us on Twitter. We're always talking birds all throughout the day at Locked On Birds and at DiBiase, LOE. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm Louie DiBiase signing off. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL podcast. All the news across the league in under 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your shows. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for downloading and listening. And let's go Birds.